Look Outside, a turn-based horror RPG that came out a mere 6 months ago and recently hit its 1.7 update and is moving rapidly towards 2.0 next month. I developed something of a soft spot for the game in the last 3 months, and I've been playing and clocked in a disgusting 350 hours between me and my girlfriend's playthroughs. There's dozens of characters to love with tons of funny, emotional, and heartfelt interactions, including a swath of companions you can recruit into your party. I have a few standouts among that category, and while my favorites are Lee, the grinning beast, Audrey, the living vending machine, and Helen, the gardener, that particular group of badass women doesn't really make a compelling challenge run for the game. A few challenge runs have already been made for it, and despite its unique, complex difficulty, you see, it's nowhere near as hard or as unforgiving as something like Fear and Hunger. A duology that has properly filtered me for now, and the game's difficulty presents itself in fits and starts. Less starts and more fits if you're running with an amazingly cracked out team like Helen, Lee, and Audrey. Or, God forbid, Joel. At any rate, the game certainly can be challenging, and any fight can and will spell your doom and send you back to your apartment with empty hands and lost time. And this challenge is unique in that lost time can be drastically detrimental, and is, often. There are exactly 4 party members who are bugs to recruit, and each of them are either extremely late game party members or found entirely due to pure chance. In fact, one party member we will need is a little bit of both due to their recruitment method. So, to start the journey, we need to first go about recruiting our first party member, and our only one for a good spell of time, the roaches. There are exactly 2 roaches that you can find and bring back to your apartment before you make it to the basement. Yes, you heard me right. The basement is the only other place you are able to find roaches at all. After we collect our 2 creepy boys and take them home, it will require 5 meals left out overnight over 5 nights before the roaches party member decides to enter your apartment. Which is also why we needed to collect them on the first day, because if we didn't, then we go from having 10 days to beat the game down to just 9. Surely, Beam, you begin to rebut, there has to be another party member that we can recruit this early. You said one of them was down to RNG, right? Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. There is one bug party member you can find and recruit as a door encounter at least this early, and they're actually going to be essentially our assassin for this run. That would be Morton, the cricket junk collector. The only problem with Morton, and recruiting him, is that he's the only door encounter you actually can't invite into your house off rip. He needs to be given enough junk that you can randomly find in the apartment complex that he starts to follow you because you know where all the good junk is. Then how much does Morton need, you ask? Funny you should, too. He needs 14. 14 junk. And how do you find junk? Well, you find it either lying about or randomly in trash cans where you can get 1 to 3 pieces of junk. As for what we were able to collect off rip, 4. We have 4 of 14. So we go about collecting the roaches we need from Fred's apartment, grab a few items for selling and some things that we'll want for later. The second day is when problems start to arise. To get the roaches fast-tracked on day 5, we need food, and for that we need to raid apartments, and for that we need survivability. It's a real chain of command. Survivability will come with levels and equipment, however our drone won't be able to kill anything on his own, so for now we need to run away from as many fights as possible. Unfortunately, our first couple of game overs come in a bit of an embarrassing way. We get cornered in the teeth apartment by Teratoma, and then our second death is from a particularly stubborn toothling, just adamant on gnawing us to death. After that, though, it's clear sailing. We get to their fridge in the kitchen, set up baby teeth's spawn and keeping her there, and then getting back out. Unfortunately, Joel isn't on the list to save this time, but don't worry, he's going to play a very big role in the next one that I do. After Tooth House, we make sure to hit Vincent's apartment, picking it mostly clean of all contents. We make sure to get the fridge and the crafting supplies because we absolutely will need them where we're going. However, like I said before, we make sure to leave the trash cans untouched. We need those to hit big. So in the meantime, we hit Edwin's apartment on the 3rd day, get his fridge emptied to feed the endless mouths of the roaches, and set up the telescope for later. This is actually a good point to go over the requirements of this run. To set it all straight, the endgame will see a party of 4 briefly, but more realistically we'll only have 3 playable party members. Morton and roaches are going to be our 2 mainstays, but we will have 2 surprises later on that I think you're going to enjoy. To win, we will kill every main boss that got updated with 1.6 because I like that benchmark that Cheeseman set in his Earnest Only run. In addition to those bosses, we'll also have to hunt down and kill our mortal enemy, the only man who stands against all pests and filth, Papano. Only when we've killed all of those bosses can we face him at our strongest, and if we can defeat him, then we can finally take on Exalted 4. Should be easy enough if we can beat Pap though. He's kind of the final boss for this run. We make some risky plays around floor 1, trying to nab the fringe contents of the plant department against all of our and the game's better judgment, and then nab some cash while we're at it. Very nearly died to a rib cage and skull plant, but clutch out exactly 1 HP. We dance with death one more time with the boss here, and then skedaddle with everything in the bathroom and hit the kitchen, then dip. Once the collection plate is finally full of food, it's time to take out the trash. Our first trash can is in Vincent's, and it's a bust, but the second immediately makes this file worth keeping, just giving us 3 junk, and that's massive. With that, we are halfway there. Then we go about looting the frozen apartment fridge and the taxidermy apartment fridge. And we get very close to death fighting against scissors, just making some mistakes moving around. And unfortunately, we do end up dying by Clint, but it's very good that we saved beforehand. Finally, on the 5th and final day, we get roaches and the run can officially begin. I did a few things off screen like beating Baby Tith and clearing Vincent's apartment out in proper, but nothing too important. What is important is that our first real encounter with roaches will be against the Rat King, so let's break the character down in this fight. Most of the damage we inflict on the Rat King is done via items. We've been crafting like acid flasks and fire bombs. The Rat King is weak to crushing damage and fire damage, but unfortunately the roaches are not spec toward melee combat whatsoever. I've never really used them before this run, so finding out that half of their equipment slots, arguably the most important ones, are all inaccessible was a big hit to their viability. You cannot swap out their headgear, body slot, or feet slots. That means we have no protective wear, no reliable agility amp, and no coat of arms. This means that roaches will spend most of their time with a gun as their main weapon slot for the run. They are usually described as a spellcaster in the fandom, and looking at their abilities, I really finally see why. Roach Cannon sets up most of their abilities at the cost of health, and later Roach Wave will too. It deals piercing damage, which is a very useful damage type here in the early game. It also swarms enemies with roaches, which deals a little bit of what I believe is either piercing or corruption damage, but most importantly that damage heals the roaches. It's not a lot, but that healing does not care about whether roaches are alive or not, which means they can be revived by their swarms. This is actually really useful in specific circumstances. That being said, the cost of 30 HP makes this ability not very worth the damage it deals, especially when Swarm has 3 levels, so you need to use 3 uses of Roach Cannon just to get there. That maximum value puts an HP cost of 90 over your head. And that's really not worth it when you're also taking into account that enemies are attacking you at the same time. Later on, roaches will get some other damaging abilities that we can use, but we can talk about those when we get them. In the meantime, the Rat King falls to a final spray of bullets and we can move on with his crown. And now that we have the crown, we can start collecting even more crucial pieces to this puzzle. Like going to the rat that we left alive in Rafta's room, getting the sewage blade, and 5 more pieces of junk. That puts us at 12. We're just barely under the cusp. With floor 1 mostly complete and our junk dangerously close to the limit, we decide to hit the ground floor and wrap that all up. We bolt straight for the men's bathroom and then... it was finally time. We had just gotten enough to get Morton, and now we just needed to grind door encounters. And oh my god, what a grind it was going to... Oh, look at that. We died to a mad pizza. Well, we beat it on the rematch, though. And then we get clapped up by Edwin. And that is how I found out about the Roach's self-revive feature with their swarm debuff. It was this actual loss, this specific loss, that made me realize that we absolutely needed Morton to continue this run if we wanted any opportunity to show off Roach's other abilities. However, before we did get Morton, We needed to do some spring cleaning over in Freddy's house. Wrapped up Shadow Fred, put the tumor out of his misery, and then we mopped up Toxic Frank. Usually a tougher fight solo. We actually sold the fake cowboy hat and made it so much more manageable. Still, a close call even with the pieces enraged. That's one more problem solved, and we mosey on down to Bright Floyd and get some healing before we hightail it back home. We do a tiny bit more prep work around the place, opening up the frozen apartment to get to Pom Pom, getting the negative disc out of Edward's apartment, and collecting the patchwork gear from Taxidermy's apartment, which will be very important for one of our 2 secret party members later. Then we accidentally feed ourselves to Shadow. Then it finally happens. As we start playing Honko's Grand Adventure, we hear a knock at the door, and who do we see standing there in all his glory? So we get Morton, and the run can finally begin. We add him to our party, save with Sybil so that we can get started on what hopefully is our last grind. You see, Morton is a very simple party member. He only has 3 abilities, and the first 2 let him use bandages and first aid kits in combat for a very small stamina cost. The third and final ability is Fidget. For no cost, Morton sifts through some junk that he can put into his body slot. Unfortunately, this means he'll never be able to use coat of arms or the chest plate or any really good defensive equipment, but he can get one of the 2 really good pieces of junk, Severed Hand or Mysterious Prism. Either of these would define Morton's entire kit for the rest of this playthrough. The Mysterious Prism makes him a very useful tank, giving him a bonus 2 to all of his defensive stats and 50% resistance to crushing, slashing, piercing, and ballistic damage. The one that we got, however, Severed Hand, gives him bonus agility and lets him attack twice in 1 turn. That makes him easily one of the most reliable DPS characters in the game and locks him in as our main source of basic damage. We outfit him with a pizza cutter or the sewage blade, depending on where we are, when we just sit back and let that cricket mow the goddamn lawn.
Hey, Brody! Brody, hold on.
Other ground floor shenanigans include, but not limited to, Mutts very fortunately having the lockpick, as well as a number of other important things like the cattle prod and the training belt. We acquired those, and then we made our way back onto the first floor for our first real boss fight with our full party, the Face Taker. Face Taker Fred got an update. He's got new attacks and new animations, but more importantly than any damage that you deal during his startup phase does not transfer to his final health bar anymore. This would normally be quite a difficult fight for a 2-person team like this, and it is still fairly close, but luckily for us, roaches gained their first really good combat spell from all that extra grinding we did on the first floor, Acid Missile. Roaches' damage, as far as their spells go, is split into 2 categories. The roach spells deal a piercing damage, and then their damage scales based on their health. Unfortunately, the scaling is extremely low. Piercing does not remain a useful damage type in the late game, and the self-inflicted cost is far too high to warrant much use after, as far as I've noticed. On the other side of the spectrum, their elemental spells like Acid Missile, Fireball to a lesser extent, and Thunder Roach to a greater extent all scale purely on level and carry very useful status effects. This means they will always be useful no matter what point in the game you find yourself. Well, with the exception of Fireball, which has such painfully low base damage as to never actually be useful. Seriously, with a base 4 damage plus 3 times your level, it really doesn't ever impress. With Acid Missile's level 11 requisition and 10 base damage plus 6 per level, and Thunder Roach's eventual 20 base damage and 10 per level in area of effect at level 14, Fireball just never really stands out, even against enemies that are actually weak to fire. It even has the weaker of the 3 debuffs, inflicting burn instead of acid or paralysis. Unfortunately, that scaling leaves it in a really sour spot, and I think it could really use a buff. Regardless, we take out Face Taker, and then we promise the real Fred that will come and take care of the rest of the paintings, but we never actually come back to him. Oops. Then we send Nestor up to his future wife and future doom before meandering into Henderson's personal hell. Thankfully, everything here is weak to slashing, so it's a simple matter to mop up most enemies here and score the basement key. But not before we save and get a very weird visual bug which distracts me and make me accidentally feed myself to Shadow again. I'm spiraling, can you tell? Okay, fine. We reset again. We beat the dog shit out of Edwin finally, and now we have Morton, and then we gift wrap Pom Pom before we move on to Jean's place. She has some great options for equipment that last us for a very long time, and some stuff for selling besides. It's here that we actually realize just how poorly Fireball scales. A grenade or cleave from Morton doesn't set them up for a Fireball to kill the Hydra heads, and sometimes it even takes more than 2. This is about where I start swearing off using it. After that, we do a very quick test drive with taxidermy with our current build and level. We get all the way up to his 4th and final phase before the 3 heads just wipe the floor with my poor buggy boys. Unfortunately, we are going to have to do a bit more grinding before we're at that level, although it is really nice to see that we are a lot closer to managing this fight than I thought. A couple of fire bombs and probably some cleaves will have us set, but for now, that's just going to be a dream for the future. In the meantime, we did eventually have to get back to Mr. Henderson's apartment, and I can hear it calling. The new APC enemy looks super scary, but his damage isn't anything unmanageable at our current level. It gets close, but we ultimately scrape by. With Henderson's apartment done and the basement key in hand, we move on to our next power spike. Nestor, good buddy, how are you doing? The old ball and chain treating you well? Yeah, that's just about the way. We assist Nestor in convincing Eugene that capitalism sucks, and the only way to achieve happiness is to relinquish all material wealth by taking all of his shit. Then it's onward to the basement, where we promptly loot a bunch of shit, get some nasty backscales off of a weird bug man, meet a blind kid, pick a fight with the boiler beast, and pay for it with our lives and progress. Okay, alright. Yeah, you know what? Let's try this again. I mean, this was my own fault, really. So we start over. We go back. We beat the absolute fool out of taxidermy. The final phase almost got us again, but with the new addition of Thunder Roach and an extra firebomb, we clutch out a win. I think the new last phase is actually quite the addition to the taxidermy boss. It looks insanely good, and it makes an already tough boss even more so. Then we make our way back to the basement and introduce our first special super secret party member. Tickle! The tick. Tickle is actually the reason we've been doing anything with our Sam at all. He's the reason why we named him Drone in the first place. Tickle will be piloting Sam as a flesh mech, and he will be our team's paladin, providing support with transfusion, self-healing with Tickle Bite, as well as access to all of those amazing skills that Sam gets through playing video games. Now we can take our time cleaning up the sewers. The sewer beast is a light battle, but the enforcer, surprisingly, very nearly takes us out. Then it's time for our rematch with the boiler beast, and it goes much better. Despite all of the jokes up to this point, this is going to be our final team moving forward. Anything about secret party members, Phippe aside, bugs this, Tickle, Morton, and roaches are as strong as we are going to get. With this team, we are finally ready to face off against the hardest super boss of the game, the Furnace. Our first encounter is a pure accident. I stepped too close, didn't read the prompt, and started the fight by accident instead of just walking away, and I got mollywopped. But I managed not to game over, so I reset, equip the things that I need, blow a couple of elixirs, and get the fight running again. Furnace is difficult, very difficult, easily the hardest boss to fight in the game and easily the hardest to prepare for. Every 3 rounds or so, he automatically releases a massive fire blast, dealing insane damage, even through fire resistance. I haven't tried to grind out the Curio Merchant this run, so my only form of fire resist is the form of Eugene's Ruby Ring on the roaches. However, the fire blast deals damage based on the Furnace's current health, so we just have to deal enough damage to lower that, right? Yeah, right, exactly. That's so much easier said than done. The Furnace has tons of attacks that go off regardless of whether or not it has any action economy. We have to use one of our healing sprays before its first fire blast just to ensure survival. I couldn't tell if roaches or Morton with the cattle prod paralyzed it, but what I could tell is that it was still fucking dealing damage, even with its not being able to take its own turns. Fortunately, Tickle was able to keep up the nitro boost, and Roaches and Morton just needed to sink in as much damage into that tiny window as they possibly could. After a very, very close call, we just scraped by with Tickle dead, Morton on 1 HP, and Roaches just at half. And it's all worth it, because after all of that fighting, we finally make it to our last party member, Phippe, my beloved, beautiful moth boy, 0 skills, no good stats, dumb as a box of rocks, and cute as a button. This is going to be our final member. This is the linchpin to our party, and we accidentally feed ourselves to the Spore Mother because we were clicking through dialogue again. Fuck! Alright, from the top. Talk to Lyle, talk to Jean, save the kids, break the furnace, rescue Phil, kill Phil and his bitch-ass mom, get out of Dodge. Here we go, boys. It's time for the ride to hell. I'm a huge fan of this fight. I just can't help feeling a little disappointed by it. I'm not mad. It's super cool. It's a great, fun, unique fight. It's just a damage check. And I literally cannot think of any possible way that you would lack the damage necessary to clear it by now. You would have to handicap yourself so much to make this fight tight. Unlike the other super boss, Furnace, which is naturally just really difficult, I feel like the time limit almost makes this fight need to be nerfed by Frankie, but I would actually prefer it if it was just a healthier and tankier boss. Does that make sense? Like, it's personally speaking. Every phase just feels like it dies way too quickly before you get to taste it. Taxidermy's phases last way longer and feel way more dangerous than Hellride as it does now. And that's such a shame for such a cool boss fight that guards the best weapon in the game. Even so, with Hellride battered properly, we get the Hell Sword, the best and last weapon Morton will ever want or need. Why I ever swap it out is beyond me, but eventually I do try out the chainsaw, and let me tell you folks, big fucking mistake. This thing, Hell Sword, fucks. I make another big mistake and try out the double-barrel shotgun found in the parking garage using the electronic car fob from the plant apartment, and this thing deals more damage than the old war rifle from Henderson's apartment, so that's great, but it only carries 2 bullets, so it needs to be reloaded every 1 to 2 turns as opposed to every 4 to 8 for the old war rifle. Big damage drop off for the roaches, and we almost pay for the price against the elevator thing. It's not that bad, but it was made a tougher fight with the new buffs. They did so much to beef it up, and we almost flub it. Still, we eke out another close shave and move on to Typewriter and Garbage Worm. Both far easier fights, but the real challenge dawns soon. With the Garbage Worm slaughtered, we finally receive the key to our true end goal for this run. Unfortunately, I did make a ginormous oopsie poopsie and forgot to go back and kill Trench Digger. Now, you would be forgiven in thinking that it was just lost in the myriad of game overs that I've suffered, but I assure you, brother just fucking forgot. A strangely difficult boss fight. Honestly, I can't even begin to place it. If you were to ask me, perhaps in the comment section, writing exactly this, Josh, what the actual heck penis is going on? This fight is the mid-game capstone boss. Why are you struggling so hard? To which, dear viewer, I'd respond, I couldn't even begin to tell you. I can't possibly fathom it. It's just, for some reason, the damage just wasn't damaging. Nevertheless, Trench Digger falls, and here we stand at the precipice of the end, and after everything we've been through, the epic highs and all the resets, I almost feel a bit scared. That part of me knows that he'll drop easy, and it'll be sad despite the joke, but another part of me is just really invested in the theme of the team now. I mean, really. This is what we did this for. This is the end. This is why we started this run in the first place. It all had to end here. Oh well. Warriors of Dark have earned a win over Light by now. We slay Papapino and make our way to the roof. We've cut down his blade, so we may as well go for God at this point. The Chaos Quartet makes for a nice fight for our champions of filth. They stand at the altar of their faith and cast us into the maw, but it will take more than this false idol to squish my bugs. They inflict innumerable acts of pain upon Morton, taking him out early on, and throw a black hole in for good measure, just for the rest of the party. Tickle is made to panic, the one status effect he didn't have immunity to, so he couldn't use transfusion to pick Morton back up. Instead, he has to use a stimulant while the roaches keep up their volley of gunfire and acid missiles, while we eat yet another black hole. We very nearly lose Tickle and Morton, but we ultimately all make it through alive as the quartet wanted to make their last attack, another black hole and a shuddering cough. We run very quick recovery and make sure that our party is ready and equipped to face off against the Exalted Four. With our heads in the clouds and the world in our hands, the only thing left to do is finish the job. And at this point, I'll just let you see how much damage we did in the first round and realize that this is a done deal. The run is over. We absolutely succeeded. So while I let this play out behind you, I will really quickly go over my thoughts on the run itself. Starting off with player 1, Tickle really surprised me, honestly. I didn't really set anything up to make him good or give him good stats for combat. I thought he'd play mostly a supportive role, but Tickle Bite actually rips. It's super sustainable to just use Tickle. Basically free combat revives, and self-sustain is always nice to have at a low cost. I think honestly, whenever I play from now on, Tickle will see use. Even losing health doesn't make this like a really bad trade-off, because keeping high health with healing is way better than just naturally having high health, because you can't kill a person who just won't fall down. Roaches, on the other hand, were actually a bit disappointing overall. I think their specials are all super cool, but most of them are so weak. After Teeth House, Roach Cannon does not feel good. Roach Wave never really feels good, even with how much damage it deals, and 90 HP just feels like such a big chunk of health to lose for it. Fireball scales so poorly for an early game AoE, especially when Thunder Roach is only 2 levels away. It has so much potential to be so much more fun, and I know it can't do nearly as much damage as Thunder Roach, but maybe at least half? It barely does a quarter where it's at right now. And last but not least, certainly not least, Morton. The absolute undisputed GOAT of the run. He is the only reason that this run was even possible the way that I was playing it, and he isn't just an item spam fest. His junk cycling could make for another interesting challenge run if anybody out there wants to do it. Somebody more staunch than I and far more tolerable with challenge runs. But Severed Hand made him such an incredible DPS. Hellsword attacks rip when you're kitted out to deal them, and then 2 at a time, and usually critically striking? Yes, please. A super fun run, despite having 2/3 of the time you have in-game left to beat it. I think I really appreciate Morton a hell of a lot more after this. If anybody wants to take this to the next step further, you could just have Morton swap out junk after every fight. That way you can always get a new experience with how his loadout is. I think In my future runs of the game, Roaches will probably never be in my party again. He's unfortunately too much work for how little he offers the team until late game. You already know how I feel about Tickle. Fucking love that tick. I think my next run will probably be a projectile only run, but as far as right now is concerned, thank you all for watching, and have a beautiful, blessed, buggy night.